The night Marcus Reyes finally followed his horse into the hills, he wasn't thinking about destiny. He was thinking about bills, past, due, unopened, stacked like quiet threats on the kitchen table. He was thinking about the ranch that had belonged to his father, and to his father before him, a ranch now hanging on by threads so thin they felt ready to snap. But most of all, he was thinking about Flint, the only gelding he had left, slipping away again into the dark as if pulled by a force Marcus couldn't see. He called out once, not in anger this time, but in something closer to fear. Because tonight the horse didn't just wander. Tonight, Flint moved like he had somewhere to be. The moon threw silver across the foothills, painting the sagebrush in ghost colors. Dust lifted under Flint's hooves, just enough for Marcus to see his outline climbing toward the ridgeline. The air was unnaturally still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, and somewhere inside Marcus, something he hadn't felt in years stirred, a strange mix of dread and hope. He had no reason to hope. Nothing in his life had given him that in a long time. But as he followed Flint up the narrow trail, he felt the land pressing in around him, almost guiding him, almost whispering to him. Like it remembered him, like it had been waiting. People in town said the Reyes family had lost their touch with the land generations ago. Said the hills had turned cold to them. Said Marcus should have given up long before now. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was a fool. A broke fool chasing after a horse who no longer listened. But then something happened. Something small. Something sharp. When Flint stepped onto a rocky ledge near the ridge, his hoof struck the ground, and the sound that came out was not the dull thud of rock. It was metallic, hollow, echoing deeper than any stone should ever echo. Marcus stopped. The night changed. Because that sound, that single metallic ring, didn't belong to nature. It belonged to something buried. Flint pawed at the ground again, harder this time, sending dust sliding off the edge. And Marcus heard it once more, louder, clearer, impossible. A hidden chamber, a structure, something man-made lying just beneath the surface. He felt chills move up his arms. Not from cold, from recognition. Because the old stories, his father's stories, the ones Marcus had stopped believing in, they spoke of this. They whispered of narrow tunnels cut into the hills by men who vanished without explanation. They told of a mine sealed up, forgotten, protected by something older than fences or deeds. Marcus swallowed. He wasn't supposed to find this. He wasn't supposed to hear that echo. But Flint had led him straight to it, and Marcus had no idea how much that single sound would change his life. Not yet. Not tonight. Tonight was only the beginning. What Marcus didn't know was that the truth, his family's truth, was waiting under that thin layer of dirt. And once he uncovered it, there would be no going back. Not for him, not for Flint, not for the land that had been calling him home all along. Because the echo he heard wasn't just metal. It was a warning, and an invitation. And the hills never offered both, unless something big was coming. Marcus didn't know it yet, but the land was about to test him. By morning, the sky over Arroyo Bend opened into a pale wash of pinks and blues, the kind that made the desert look kinder than it really was. Marcus stood on his porch with a mug of day-old coffee, staring at Flint in the corral below. The gelding was calm now, as if the night adventure had never happened. But Marcus couldn't shake the echo. It kept replaying in his head. Clean, sharp, unnatural. He needed answers. But the answers wouldn't come from town. Arroyo Bend was a place where people knew everything about you except the truth that mattered. A place where your past stuck to your name like dust to boots. The Reyes family had once been respected. Horse handlers, land stewards, people who understood the hills better than anyone. Until the drought years. Until the debts. Until Marcus's father died and left behind more questions than land. Ever since, Marcus had been fighting a losing battle, fighting to keep the ranch, fighting to keep the last of the horses fed, fighting to stay invisible long enough to avoid another debt collector's truck pulling into his driveway. And now this. A horse acting strange. A sound that shouldn't exist. Part of him wanted to pretend nothing had happened. It would be easier. Safer. But the land didn't like lies. It never had. He watched Flint lift his head toward the foothills again, ears pricked, as if listening for something Marcus couldn't hear. And a pressure built in Marcus's chest. Quiet, steady, insistent. Something was calling the horse. And maybe calling him too. When he finally walked into town that afternoon, the usual stares followed him. Some curious, some pitying, some sharp enough to cut. No one bothered to hide their opinions in Arroyo Bend. At the feed store, Old Man Carter pretended not to see him until Marcus spoke first. He just needed supplies. A few things he could still afford. A few things he couldn't. But the conversation turned the same direction every conversation had lately. "You know you can't keep that ranch much longer," Carter muttered as he filled a bag of oats. "Land like that deserves someone who can take care of it." Marcus bit down the words he wanted to say. Carter wouldn't understand. None of them would. "Maybe," Marcus answered softly. "Maybe not." Carter snorted. "Heard your horse was out again last night. Someone saw him heading toward Ridgeback Hill. Dangerous place to wander." Marcus froze for half a second. "Who told you that?" "Doesn't matter. Point is, you best put that animal down if he's losing his senses. Saves you trouble later." Put him down. The words hit harder than they should have. Flint wasn't sick. He wasn't old. He wasn't losing anything. He was leading Marcus somewhere. Marcus felt that truth deep, the way you feel a coming storm in your bones before it hits the air. But if he said that out loud, they'd laugh him out of town. So Marcus just nodded, picked up the bag, and walked out. He didn't see the man standing by the water trough watching him leave. The one with narrowed eyes. The one who had been waiting for any sign the Reyes land still held secrets. The antagonist of this story didn't show his face yet. But he was there, listening, planning. Because Marcus wasn't the only one who knew the stories of the old mine, and he wasn't the only one who wanted what lay beneath those hills. Marcus just didn't know it yet, but he would. Soon. Very soon. Marcus walked the long dirt road home, with the weight of Carter's words sitting heavy on his shoulders. The air tasted like dust and old sunlight, the kind that clung to your tongue long after the day ended. He tried to focus on the rhythm of his steps, the crunch of gravel, the slow shift of shadows as the sun dropped toward the west. But his mind kept circling back to that sound, that impossible metal echo buried under the hill like a heartbeat inside the earth. He didn't know whether to fear it or trust it. But he knew one thing. Flint wasn't leading him there by mistake. When he reached the ranch, the quiet felt bigger than usual. Too big. The kind of quiet that made a man aware of everything he had lost and everything he had left. Which, for Marcus, wasn't much. A run-down barn. A house with thin walls. A few acres of land drawing a little more each year. And Flint. Just Flint. The gelding stood at the fence line, staring in the same direction he had the night before. Marcus moved closer, slow and careful, not wanting to break whatever spell the horse was under. "You saw something," he murmured, "or heard something, and you want me to see it too." Flint blinked once, steady and calm, as if saying yes. Marcus rested his hand on the horse's neck. The warmth there grounded him, pulled him out of his fear and into something steadier, something almost like purpose. He didn't recognize that feeling at first. It had been years since he'd felt it. but he recognized the ache underneath it. The ache of a man who had nothing left to lose. Inside the house, the silence wrapped around him like an old coat. The stack of bills was still waiting on the table, right where he had left it. He sat down, spread them out, and stared at numbers that made less sense every month. Property tax overdue, feed invoice overdue, vet bill overdue, and the bank notice. Cold, sharp, unavoidable. 2 months left, maybe less. He rubbed his forehead and tried to breathe. Tried to remind himself he had survived worse. But the truth was simple. One more bad season, one more drought, one more sick animal, and the Reyes ranch would be gone. Sold off piece by piece until nothing but stories remained. His father's voice drifted through his mind. Deep, steady, certain in a way Marcus no longer felt. The land gives. The land tests. But it never lies to you, son. Not if you listen. Marcus had stopped listening years ago. Grief will do that to a man. But now, the land was speaking again. And Flint was listening for him. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. And in that stillness, he heard it again, soft, faint, memory more than sound. The metallic ring echoing from the ridge. It felt impossible. It felt dangerous. It felt like hope wearing the mask of a warning. He opened his eyes. He knew what he had to do. But before he could stand, a truck engine growled outside. Heavy tires rolled across his gravel driveway, crunching slow enough to be deliberate. Marcus tensed. No one came out here unless they wanted something. He stepped onto the porch as the dust settled. A tall man in a dark ranch coat leaned against his truck door, thumbs hooked in his belt. His hat shadowed most of his face, but Marcus recognized him instantly. Clay Hargrove, owner of the largest ranch in Arroyo Bend. A man who collected land the way others collected trophies. A man who smiled only when someone else was losing. "Marcus," Clay drawled, voice smooth as wind-polished bone. "Heard you might be looking to sell." Marcus's stomach tightened. "You heard wrong." Clay chuckled. "Come on now. A man in your situation should be practical. That property of yours, well, it's wasted out here. I could put it to better use." "You could put it in your pocket," Marcus said quietly. "That's what you mean." Clay's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That land holds value, even if you don't know what kind yet." Marcus felt his pulse spike. Clay knew something. Maybe not everything, but something. And that meant Marcus had to move fast. "Not for sale," Marcus said, his voice firmer than he expected. Clay tilted his head. "Everyone's got a price." "Not me." Clay studied him for a long moment. Too long. And then his smile shifted. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't even cruel. It was hungry. "Well now," Clay said softly, "we'll see." He tipped his hat, climbed into his truck, and drove off, leaving a cloud of dust and a deeper sense of unease behind him. Marcus watched until the truck disappeared down the road. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. Clay Hargrove only showed interest in land when he smelled profit, which meant the old stories about the hills, about rare ore, abandoned shafts, forgotten veins. Clay believed them more than anyone else. And if Clay suspected Marcus was onto something, things were going to get dangerous. Back in the corral, Flint pawed at the dirt again, glancing toward the ridge with a strange urgency. Marcus walked to him, brushing dust from the horse's mane. "You led me there for a reason," he whispered, "and I'm going back." As if in answer, Flint nudged Marcus's shoulder, a firm, grounding push that felt almost human, almost like reassurance. Marcus exhaled. The decision was made. He would return to the ridge tonight. He would find what lay beneath the dirt. He would uncover the truth his father never spoke out loud. Because whatever was buried in those hills was meant for him, and tonight the land would speak again. He just hoped he was still the kind of man who could listen. That night, the sky over Arroyo Bend darkened into a deep velvet blue, the kind that made the stars burn hotter, sharper, brighter than they had any right to. Marcus saddled Flint with steady hands, though his chest carried a storm he couldn't name. Fear, curiosity, something else too. Something else too. Something passed down through the Reyes blood long before he was born. Flint kept shifting his weight, ears flicking toward the ridge as if urging Marcus to hurry. "All right," Marcus murmured. "Show me." They moved out in silence. The ranch fell away behind them, swallowed by shadows. The foothills rose ahead, patient and watchful. The deeper they climbed, the colder the air became. Marcus felt it on his neck first, a subtle shift, like stepping into a space that didn't want to be disturbed. Flint stopped when they reached the rocky ledge, the same one from the night before, the same place the earth had spoken. Marcus dismounted, took a breath, and knelt beside the spot. He brushed aside loose dirt with his glove, revealing the rock surface underneath. He tapped it once with the butt of his knife. A hollow ring answered. Not imagination, not wishful thinking. Real. Flint took a step back, lowering his head as if waiting for what came next. Marcus scraped harder, pushing dirt aside until a strange pattern emerged. A square outline. Edges of old wood, petrified with time. Metal hinges, eaten by rust. This wasn't natural. It wasn't an accident. It was a door. A mine entrance sealed and buried decades ago. His father's stories returned in fragments. Voices around a fire, silhouettes in the dusk, warnings whispered with reverence. They dug too deep, his father once said. They found something that wasn't meant to be taken. As a boy, Marcus thought it was just a tale. Something told to scare children away from the hills. But kneeling here now, tracing the edges of a forgotten entrance, the stories felt different. Heavy. True. He pressed his hand against the wooden beam. The timber groaned faintly, tired from years of silence. A cold rush of air escaped from the cracks. Not natural cold, deeper cold. The kind that came from hidden places, untouched by light. Flint snorted and backed away. Not out of fear, more like warning. Marcus swallowed hard. "Easy, boy. I'm not going inside. Not yet." His voice echoed down the hillside, swallowed almost instantly by the dark. He needed tools. Light. A rope. Something to mark the entrance before the wind covered it again. But more than anything, he needed time. Time to understand what he was standing on. Time to understand why Flint had led him here in the first place. Marcus stood, brushing dirt off his hands. He turned back toward the trail and froze. A figure stood at the bottom of the hill, a silhouette outlined by moonlight, not moving, just watching. Marcus felt Flint tense beside him, muscles tightening like bowstrings. The figure stayed silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, it stepped back into the dark and vanished. Clay. It had to be Clay. The realization hit Marcus in the stomach. Clay had followed him. Or someone working for Clay had. Either way, the secret was no longer his alone. The land didn't lie. And tonight it was screaming a warning. He mounted Flint, heart racing. They rode home fast, cutting through the dark like a blade. Every sound felt sharper. Every shadow felt alive. When the ranch finally appeared, Marcus jumped off and closed the gate behind them, his breath trembling. He wasn't scared of Clay. He was scared of what Clay would do if he learned what Flint had uncovered. Men like Clay didn't take treasures. They took everything. Inside the house, Marcus lit a lantern and set it on the table. The flame flickered in the still air, casting long shadows across the room. He stared at his hands, calloused, dusty, trembling, and pressed his palms flat on the wood. He finally understood the stakes. The mine wasn't just a relic. It wasn't just potential wealth. It was a doorway into his family's past. A past Clay Hargrove wanted to control. And that meant a line had been drawn, not by Marcus, by the land itself. He was being tested again, not for survival, for purpose. Flint stood outside the window, head raised toward the ridge as if still listening, still attuned to something Marcus couldn't grasp yet. "What do you know?" Marcus whispered. "What did you feel out there?" Flint didn't answer. He didn't need to. His stillness spoke louder than words. Marcus leaned back, exhausted but awake in a way he hadn't felt in years. The old stories weren't stories anymore. The hills were alive with memory. And he was standing on the edge of something bigger than loss, bigger than debt, bigger than fear. His father's voice echoed through his mind again. "The land chooses its keeper, son, not the other way around." Marcus closed his eyes. For the first time since his father died, he felt chosen again. But the night wasn't finished with him yet. Because as he lay down to rest, thunder rolled across a cloudless sky. Soft, distant, impossible. Not weather, something else, a sign, a warning, a beginning. And Marcus Reyes had no idea just how deep into the hills destiny was about to pull him. Morning came slower than usual, drifting into Marcus's room in soft gold streaks that painted the floorboards and warmed the cold edges of the night before. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the outline of that buried door. Every time he drifted toward rest, he heard that hollow metallic echo repeating like a memory trying to claw its way back to the surface. When he stepped outside, Flint stood waiting for him near the porch. Not restless, not panicked, simply present, like a friend who knew the weight Marcus carried and was choosing to stand beside him anyway. "Morning, boy," Marcus said, rubbing Flint's muzzle. "You did something big last night, bigger than you know." But deep down, Marcus suspected Flint did know, or at least felt something he couldn't understand. The horse nudged him, slow and deliberate, as if urging him to eat, to breathe, to remember he was still living in a world that wanted him to keep going. Marcus hadn't felt that kind of quiet comfort since his father died. It startled him, how much a simple gesture could open up a part of him he thought had closed forever. Inside the kitchen, he heated water for coffee. The old kettle groaned in protest. Everything in this house seemed tired except the horse outside. Marcus didn't have anyone left to share mornings with. No partner, no children. His mother lived in the next town over, in a small care home where the nurses treated her like fragile glass. The strokes had taken much of her memory. Some days she knew him, some days she didn't. She'd once been strong, proud, fierce about the Reyes land. Now she was fading like a photograph left out in the sun. He thought of visiting her today. She always loved hearing about the horses, even if she couldn't remember their names anymore. Maybe, he thought, she'd still remember something about the old stories, something about the hills, something about the mine no one spoke of but everyone feared. That hope carried him through the morning chores. He fed Flint, checked the fences, hauled water, and tried to ignore the feeling of being watched. Yesterday's shadow still clung to him. He knew Clay Hargrove wouldn't back off now that he sensed something valuable in the hills. But Clay didn't understand what Marcus had discovered. It wasn't just ore. It wasn't just wealth. It was history. Reyes history. And history didn't belong to men who treated land like a ledger. After finishing the chores, Marcus loaded a small bag into his truck, some coffee for his mother, a photo of the ranch from years ago, and a sketch he'd found his father once made of the foothills. Back then, Marcus thought his father was just doodling. Now he wasn't so sure. Flint whinnied as Marcus climbed into the truck. The sound was sharp, urgent. "I'll be back," Marcus said, giving the horse one last look. "I promise." Flint stamped a hoof once, as if he understood. The drive to Willow Pine's care home was long and quiet, the road winding through open fields that once held cattle before drought swallowed them. Every mile carried the weight of memories Marcus rarely let himself feel. Riding beside his father, learning how to read the wind, listening to his mother sing in the kitchen while the horses grazed outside. He had lost so much. But something inside him whispered that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't done yet. When he walked into his mother's room, she was staring out the window at the courtyard garden. Her silver hair was braided over her shoulder. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes softened when they landed on him. "Marcus," she breathed, voice thin but warm. "You look tired." He smiled. "You always said ranching isn't for people who like sleep." She chuckled faintly. "Your father slept less than anyone I knew." She remembered. At least a piece of her did. He sat down beside her, watching her fingers trace the armrest in slow, thoughtful circles. He hesitated before speaking. "Ma, do you remember the old stories? The ones about the hills? About the mine?" Her hand stopped moving. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then her gaze shifted to him, clearer than it had been in months. "Your father warned you about that place." Marcus's breath caught. "So, it's real." She swallowed, eyes drifting back to the window. "Real? Yes. But not just a mine. People vanished there. Men went in searching for more than they needed, and the earth swallowed them. Your father believed the land protected itself. He respected that." A chill worked its way down Marcus's spine. "Why didn't he tell me more?" "Because you were meant to learn only when it was time," she whispered. "Some truths wait for the right ears." Marcus felt the hair on his neck rise. "Ma, Flint found something. Something buried. A door." She closed her eyes. "Then the land has chosen you." The words hit him like a hammer, not because they were dramatic, but because she said them with certainty, as if she had been waiting to say them. Before he could ask more, a nurse entered with medication, breaking the moment. His mother drifted back into quiet confusion, unable to finish the thought. But she had said enough. On the drive home, Marcus felt something blooming in his chest. Fear, yes, but also strength. The kind that comes when a man realizes he isn't walking alone. His father's stories. His mother's warning. Flint's guidance. The land's echo. It was all connected. By the time he reached the ranch, the sun was sinking toward the horizon. Flint trotted toward him, snorting with a mixture of impatience and relief. "I know," Marcus said, placing a hand on Flint's neck. "There's more out there. More I need to see." Flint leaned into him, warm and steady. And in that moment, something shifted, something unspoken but powerful. A bond forming not out of ownership or training, but out of trust, out of shared purpose, out of a destiny neither fully understood. Marcus felt it like a heartbeat syncing with another. He wasn't alone anymore. He hadn't been for a while. He just needed to notice. The wind rolled across the ridge, carrying a faint rumble like distant thunder, like something waking beneath the hills. Marcus lifted his eyes toward the peaks, knowing the next step would be harder than anything he'd faced in years. But he wasn't afraid. Not with Flint beside him. Not with the land calling him forward. Not with the truth inching closer with every breath. The bond had begun, and destiny was waiting on the other side of a buried door. The evening settled over the ranch like a soft blanket, but Marcus couldn't shake the strange heaviness in the air. It wasn't dread. It wasn't fear. It was something older, something patient, something watching. The kind of presence you feel when the land itself is paying attention. Flint followed him around the yard, stepping close whenever Marcus slowed, as if the horse sensed the questions running through his mind. The grief, the hope, the weight of a future he wasn't sure he deserved. Marcus brushed him down, running the curry comb in slow circles that steadied his breathing. Flint wasn't the kind of horse you bonded with overnight. He'd always been aloof, quiet, distant in a way that made some people think he lacked spirit. But Marcus knew better. There was a depth to this animal, something thoughtful, something listening beneath the surface. "You knew what you were doing," Marcus whispered. "Leading me out there, showing me that door." Flint's ear flicked. A tiny movement, but it hit Marcus harder than expected. "You're not just wandering," he said. "You're guiding." Flint pressed his head against Marcus's shoulder, and just like that, the dam inside Marcus cracked a little more. He'd been strong for too long. Too many years carrying burdens alone. Too many losses he never let himself grieve. His father. The drought. The dying land. The empty barns. The loneliness that settled into his bones like cold. But tonight, he didn't feel alone. Not anymore. The sun dipped behind the hills, bathing the ranch in a warm, fading glow. Marcus leaned against the fence, Flint beside him, both facing the ridge as if waiting for the night to speak. The first stars appeared, soft pinpricks against the deepening blue. A single breeze rolled down the hillside, carrying the faint scent of iron and sagebrush. "The land chose you," his mother had said. He wasn't sure what that meant yet, but he felt it. In his chest, in his hands, in the earth beneath his boots. He was part of something he didn't understand. He stayed out there until the last light slipped away. Only when darkness fully claimed the ridge did he head inside, Flint watching him go with calm, patient eyes. Inside the house, the lantern light stretched across the table. The bills looked smaller than before, not because they mattered less, but because something larger now stood beside them. A purpose, a calling, a chance. Marcus sat down and held his father's old sketch, the one he'd taken to his mother earlier. The lines were faded, but the shapes were unmistakable. A map of the foothills, a series of marks that made no sense to him as a boy. But tonight they echoed the ridge, the path, the ledge, the door. His father had known. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered into the quiet room. The silence answered softly, not empty, not hollow, but filled with the echoes of a man who believed some truths must unfold in their own time. Marcus folded the sketch carefully, sliding it into his jacket pocket. Tomorrow he would return to the ridge, not to dig, not yet, but to listen, to understand, to see what the land wanted to reveal. Tonight, though, he needed rest. He lay down, but sleep didn't come quickly. His mind kept drifting to Flint, how the horse had pressed close, how he had stood guard as if protecting Marcus from something only he could sense. He'd never felt that kind of bond before, not even with the horses he grew up with, not even with the stallion his father swore would make Marcus a true horseman. It was different with Flint, deeper, older, like their paths had crossed long before this ranch, long before this life. Somewhere past midnight, Marcus finally drifted into a fragile sleep, but he didn't stay there long. A soft sound woke him, the muted thump of hooves outside the window. Marcus sat up fast, not alarmed, alert. He stepped onto the porch, the cold night air hitting his face. Flint stood at the fence line, staring at the ridge again. His body was tense, not scared, but bracing, like he sensed something rising beneath the ground. Marcus walked toward him slowly. "What is it, boy?" Flint tossed his head once, then looked back at Marcus with eyes that carried urgency. Not panic, not confusion, Purpose. Marcus felt it like a pulse in the air. The same energy he'd felt the night the echo first rang beneath Flint's hooves. The same magnetic pull that tugged at Flint's instincts. Something was calling again. "Not tonight," Marcus whispered. "It's too dark. We'll go at dawn." Flint held still for a moment, then lowered his head, accepting the decision even if he didn't agree. Marcus rested a hand on his neck. "We're going together. Whatever this is, you're not alone anymore." He didn't realize how true those words were. Not yet, but the night did. Thunder rumbled again, soft, distant, but clear. A warning or a promise, Marcus couldn't tell. He stayed with Flint a few minutes longer, feeling the quiet bond between them settle deeper, stronger, steadier. When he finally headed back inside, he did so with a strange certainty humming under his ribs. Tomorrow would change everything, not just for him, for Flint, for the ranch, for the truth buried beneath the hills. The bond had begun. And destiny was already taking shape in the dark, whispering through the echoes of the land. Dawn crept across Arroyo Bend with a pale stillness, the kind that made the world feel suspended between breathing and waiting. Marcus stepped outside before the sun had fully risen. Flint was already awake, standing at the gate with that same focused stillness he'd shown the last 2 nights. His ears were forward, not twitching, not uncertain, locked on the ridge as if the hills themselves were calling his name. Marcus walked up to him slowly. "You didn't sleep either, did you?" Flint blew a soft breath, warm against the morning chill. There was something in his eyes, not fear, not impatience, but a quiet understanding, a knowing, as if he felt something Marcus couldn't yet grasp. "Today," Marcus said quietly, "we go today." And Flint nodded his head. Not a nervous toss, not a restless shake, but a single, deliberate nod. Marcus saddled him with careful hands, checking every strap twice. The last thing he needed was to get injured on unstable ground. Flint waited calmly, shifting only when Marcus hesitated, nudging him with a kind of reassurance that settled deeper in his chest than he expected. "You trust me," Marcus whispered. "I'm trying to trust myself." They rode out just as the sun began bleeding through the horizon, painting the land in gold. The ranch slipped behind them, replaced by the long trail leading toward the foothills. Birds called from the mesquite trees. Dust kicked up behind Flint's hooves in soft clouds. The bond between them felt different this morning. Stronger, clearer, not forced. Chosen. Halfway up the ridge, Marcus stopped him. "Easy, slow here," he murmured. Flint obeyed instantly. It surprised Marcus every time. He'd worked with dozens of horses over the years, some stubborn, some nervous, some obedient only when fear forced them. But Flint wasn't afraid. He wasn't reacting from instinct. He was choosing to listen. At the rocky ledge, Flint halted on his own. The breeze brushed past them, carrying with it that faint metallic chill Marcus had felt before. He dismounted and knelt beside the partially exposed wooden beam. In daylight, it looked even older, weathered gray, split in places, marked by age and secrets. Marcus brushed away the dirt covering the hinge. It was unmistakable. A sealed shaft, a doorway into the belly of the hill. Flint stepped close, lowering his head until his nose nearly touched Marcus's shoulder. The gesture was so gentle, so intentional, Marcus had to pause and breathe through the sudden emotion that surged in his chest. "I know," he whispered. "We'll be careful." He took out the small tools he brought, a pry bar, a brush, a chisel. Nothing advanced, just enough to understand what he was dealing with. Flint stayed beside him the entire time, as still as a shadow, watching every movement. Marcus cleared more earth, revealing a narrow seam where the wood didn't sit flush. Someone had sealed this intentionally, not haphazardly, and not recently. The boards were old decades, maybe more, But the workmanship, Marcus paused. The craftsmanship was Reyes. He recognized the joint style, the carved initials faded by weather but still barely visible. His father's father, or maybe even earlier. The realization hit him hard. His family had sealed this mine. His family had kept this secret. And Flint, somehow, had brought him right back to it. His heart hammered against his ribs. He brushed dirt from the initials, tracing them with trembling fingers. R. Rafael Reyes. His grandfather. The one no one spoke of. The one who disappeared. Marcus's throat tightened. Why didn't anyone tell me? Flint nudged him again, firmer this time, as if urging him not to drown in the emotions swelling inside him.
Yeah, Marcus whispered. I know! One step at a time.
He didn't open the entrance. Not yet. He wasn't ready. The land wasn't ready. Something inside told him it wasn't the right moment, and pushing too soon would bring more danger than answers. Instead, he marked the area carefully, covering the entrance in a way that wouldn't draw attention from any wandering eyes, especially Clay's. The thought of Clay Hargrove sent a cold thread of tension through his chest. A man like that would tear apart the land for a pocketful of silver, let alone for something rare or sacred. We can't let him find this, Marcus said quietly. Flint turned his head toward the valley below, as if he understood exactly who Marcus was talking about. As they rode back toward the ranch, the bond between them felt different. Not just trust, not just companionship, purpose, shared and unspoken. Like two souls walking the same path, chosen by something larger than themselves. When they reached the ranch, Marcus unsaddled Flint and let him roam the corral. The gelding grazed for a few minutes before walking right back to Marcus, stopping so close that Marcus could feel his breath. You're something else, Marcus murmured, resting his forehead against Flint's. I don't know how, but you're part of this story. Maybe the biggest part. Flint exhaled softly, the warm breath washing over Marcus's cheek like an answer. Inside the house, Marcus poured himself a cup of water and stared out the window at the horse standing in the open morning light. Flint looked strong, not just physically, spiritually, like a creature carved from the land, shaped by the wind, holding memories older than the ranch itself. Marcus thought of everything his mother said, everything he found on that ridge, everything Flint had led him to. Hope flickered inside him, a small light, a fragile one, but real. For the first time in years, Marcus felt the weight on his shoulders ease just enough for him to breathe fully. He didn't have answers yet. He didn't know what lay beyond the sealed entrance. He didn't know what his grandfather had hidden. He didn't know why Flint sensed it. But he knew the bond forming between them wasn't ordinary. It was destiny brushing against the edges of his life, asking to be let in. That afternoon, while repairing a section of fence, Marcus kept glancing toward the ridge. Flint did too. Their connection had grown into something instinctive. Silent signals, shared awareness, unspoken understanding. And each glance carried a steady truth. They were in this together. The land had chosen. The horse had answered. And Marcus finally felt ready to listen. As the sun dipped and shadows stretched across the ranch, a new storm brewed far beyond the horizon. Not a storm of weather, a storm of revelation. And both Marcus and Flint felt it coming. The bond was no longer forming. It was forged, and destiny was only a breath away. The next morning, Marcus woke with the strange feeling that the day had already begun without him. The air felt different, charged somehow, like the land itself had shifted overnight. He stepped outside, rubbing sleep from his eyes, and saw Flint standing near the fence line, staring toward the road instead of the ridge. Marcus followed his gaze. A truck was approaching slowly, dust curling behind its tires. Old engine, weathered paint, familiar shape. For a moment, Marcus's chest tightened. Clay again? Another threat? But as the truck drew closer, he recognized the driver. A man in his 60s climbed out, tall and wiry, wearing a sun-beaten hat and the kind of expression that held decades of stories behind it. Jim Hawthorne, Marcus breathed, his father's closest friend. A rancher who had vanished from town right after Marcus's father died. A man who kept to himself, always moving, always watching, like someone who knew more than he ever said. Jim tipped his hat. "Heard you've been busy up in the foothills." Marcus stiffened. "From who?" Jim smirked faintly. "The land talks, son, and so do horses." Flint let out a soft nicker, stepping toward Jim with surprising familiarity. Jim reached out and touched Flint's neck with the reverence of a man greeting an old friend. "Strong spirit," Jim murmured, "and too wise to be wandering without purpose." Marcus crossed his arms. "You didn't drive all the way out here to talk riddles." Jim's smile faded. "No, I came to warn you." Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. "About what?" Jim looked toward the ridge, his face tightening in a way Marcus had never seen before. Not fear, recognition. "You found the door, didn't you?" Jim said softly. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth sat between them like a heartbeat. Jim let out a long exhale. "Your grandfather sealed it after the accident. After the others went missing, he never meant for anyone to open it again." Marcus swallowed. His voice came out rough. "What's inside?" Jim's eyes drifted to Flint. "Not what Clay thinks. And not what most folks in town whisper about. What's inside is something valuable, yes. But not the kind of treasure you can sell." Marcus's pulse quickened. "Then, what kind?" Jim didn't respond right away. He walked to the fence, running his fingers across the rail. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed, lower, heavier. The mine wasn't built for gold or silver. It was built to extract something rare. Something tied to the earth in a way men didn't understand. Something your grandfather believed shouldn't be disturbed. Men got sick in that shaft. Men vanished. Animals refused to go near it. He glanced at Flint again. "Except ones like him." Marcus frowned. "Ones like him?" Jim nodded slowly. "There are horses born with sharper senses, stronger intuition. They feel things in the land humans can't. Flint is one of them. He's not just leading you. He's reacting to what's waking beneath those hills." Marcus's breath hitched. "Waking?" Jim turned to face him fully. "You think that echo was normal?" Marcus didn't know what to say. Jim stepped closer. "Listen to me, Marcus. Your grandfather sealed that mine because something down there was changing, something no one understood. The Reyes family had a rule. When the land speaks, you obey. When it warns, you stay away." Marcus felt a surge of frustration. "So why did Flint lead me there?" Jim rested a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Maybe because the land isn't warning you away this time. Maybe it's calling you to finish what your grandfather started." The words hit Marcus with the weight of destiny. Heavy, cold, electrifying. He wanted answers. But more than that, he wanted the truth his family had hidden. "Tell me everything," Marcus said. Jim paused, looking out at the hills. "I'll tell you what I can. But some of it, you'll have to learn yourself." As the morning sun rose, they sat on the porch while Jim unfolded stories Marcus had never heard. Stories about the old mining crew, the disappearances, the strange lights seen at night, the shifts that caused no collapse, the ore samples that glowed faintly when struck. He spoke of Rafael Reyes, Marcus's grandfather, who believed the mine sat on a fault line of something ancient, something sacred, something the elders once warned not to disturb. Marcus listened, heart pounding. Flint stood close the entire time, as if guarding them from something neither man could see. When Jim finished, the silence felt thick. "So, you're saying the mine is dangerous?" Marcus said. Jim shook his head. "I'm saying it's alive." The words sent chills down Marcus's spine, but Jim wasn't done. "And that's not the worst part," Jim added quietly. "Clay knows, or thinks he knows. He's been trying to buy the Reyes land for years for one reason: the rumors of rare earth minerals under the ridge. If he finds that door, he won't stop, and he won't care who gets hurt." Marcus clenched his jaw. "He followed me the night I found it." Jim cursed under his breath. "Then you're running out of time." Marcus looked toward Flint again. The horse had lifted his head, ears pinned forward, nostrils flaring at something distant. "He senses it," Jim whispered. "He feels the shift." Marcus exhaled shakily. "What am I supposed to do?" Jim's voice softened. "You start by trusting the bond you're building with that horse. Animals like him don't lead men by accident. They lead men when the land chooses them." Marcus felt Flint's presence behind him. Steady, calm, certain. "I'm not ready," Marcus whispered. Jim stood, placing a hand on his shoulder again. "No one ever is. But destiny doesn't wait for readiness. It waits for courage." The wind shifted. Flint lifted his head higher, eyes fixed on the ridge. Jim's voice dropped to a near whisper. "And something is waiting for you up there, Marcus. Something your grandfather feared and protected and passed down without words." Marcus stared at the hills, feeling a pulse beneath the earth, a pulse echoing inside him. He didn't know what he'd find. He didn't know what truths would surface. He didn't know what the land wanted from him. But he knew the story wasn't just about a mine. It was about a legacy he was finally stepping into. A truth that Flint had sensed long before Marcus did, and a revelation that would change everything. Jim didn't stay long. He never did. The man was like wind arriving when needed, leaving before his presence changed the shape of things too much. But before he drove off, he paused beside Marcus with one last warning. "Be careful who you trust," Jim murmured. "Clay isn't working alone. He's got ears everywhere in town, and someone has already been talking." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "Talking about what?" Jim hesitated. "About you. And your horse. And the ridge." Marcus's stomach clenched. "What do they think they know?" Jim looked toward the foothills. "Enough to be dangerous." With that, he climbed into his truck and rolled down the dusty road, leaving Marcus alone with the rising weight of everything he had just learned. He stood there for a long moment, watching until the truck disappeared completely. Flint moved to his side, brushing his shoulder gently. Marcus rested his hand on Flint's neck, grounding himself in the horse's steady warmth. "People are talking about you," Marcus whispered. "About us. And not in a good way." Flint huffed softly, almost dismissive of the worry Marcus carried. But Marcus couldn't shake it. Not when so much depended on secrecy. By midday, he had no choice but to go into town. Supplies were running low, and the fences Jim mentioned late last year would need new posts soon. He saddled Flint, not out of necessity, but because he didn't want to leave the horse alone with strange tension in the air. The trail into Arroyo Bend was usually quiet. Today, it felt charged. Every rustle of brush made Flint's ears flick. Every shift of wind made Marcus glance behind them. Something had changed. The moment they entered town, Marcus felt eyes turn their way. Conversations paused. People leaned closer together, whispered, watched him like a man walking around with a secret tattooed on his skin. Marcus ignored them and made his way toward Carter's feed store. But Carter wasn't at the counter. Instead, his nephew, a boy barely 19, stared at Marcus with a look halfway between fear and curiosity. "You hear the stories?" the kid blurted, before Marcus even opened his mouth. Marcus frowned. "What stories?" The kid leaned closer, voice dropping. "About the foothills. Folks say the ground's been making noise at night, like something's moving under it." Marcus kept his face neutral. "Ground shifts all the time." "Not like this," the boy said. "Not like hollow echoes. And not when your horse has been running up that ridge." Marcus froze inside, but kept his voice level. "Who told you that?" The boy swallowed hard. "No one needed to. Clay's men been riding around asking questions. Folks say he's planning something big." Marcus set his jaw. "If you have a bag of oats back there, I'd appreciate it." The boy scrambled to get it, hands shaking slightly. When Marcus stepped outside again, the tension in the street tightened. Every face seemed to track him. Every whisper grew sharper. Even Flint shifted uneasily, lifting his head high like he smelled a coming storm. And then Clay Hargrove stepped out of the saloon. His coat was clean. His hat sat at the perfect angle. His smile was carved from arrogance and appetite. "Well now," Clay drawled, his eyes sliding to Flint. "There's the famous horse, the one who keeps running into the hills." Marcus gripped the reins tighter. "He's not famous. He's just a horse." Clay chuckled. "No, Marcus, he's not just anything. A horse like this doesn't wander without reason." He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "And neither do men who follow him." Marcus felt Flint shift beside him, shoulders tight, ears pinned back just enough to signal warning. "What do you want, Clay?" Marcus asked. Clay leaned in until his voice dropped to a private, poisonous tone. "I want the Reyes land, and I will get it, with or without your cooperation." Marcus stared back without blinking. "You're not getting my land." Clay's smile sharpened. "We'll see about that." He tipped his hat mockingly, then turned away. A cold coil of dread wrapped around Marcus's chest. Flint snorted sharply, stamping a hoof. Not in fear, but in defiance. Someone across the street muttered, "That horse ain't natural." Another whispered, "Animals sense things before we do." Rumors were spreading faster than wildfire. Marcus mounted Flint and rode out of town without another word. Once they were far enough from the buildings, he loosened his grip on the reins and exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "You feel it too, don't you?" Marcus whispered. Flint flicked an ear back, acknowledging the tension. As they rode, the landscape shifted from open plains to rugged sagebrush. The foothills rose ahead, silent but full of presence. Flint picked up his pace when the ridge came into view, moving with purpose Marcus didn't try to control. "Jim thinks something is waking," Marcus said softly. "I don't know if he means danger, or calling, or both." Flint didn't slow. When they reached the top of the ridge, Marcus dismounted, letting Flint stand beside him. The door beneath the earth was hidden again, carefully covered, but Marcus could feel it. A faint hum in the air, a pulse under the surface, a subtle vibration beneath his boots, like the land breathing in shallow, aching breaths. Flint stepped forward and placed his hoof exactly where the echo had sounded the first time. Marcus felt the vibration rise. Not loud, not violent, persistent, alive. "Why you?" Marcus whispered. "Why are you connected to this?" Flint lifted his head, looking at the ridge, then at Marcus, then back to the ground again. The movement was deliberate, too deliberate to be coincidence. A thought struck Marcus hard. "You've been here before, haven't you?" The horse didn't answer with sound. He answered with stillness, complete, unbroken, Knowing. Marcus's breath caught. Did my father use you? Did my grandfather? Flint stepped closer, pressing his forehead gently against Marcus's shoulder. An answer wrapped in silence. Memories flickered in Marcus's mind. Pictures. Moments. A vague childhood memory of Flint as a younger gelding tied near the barn while his father spoke in low voices with men. Marcus didn't recognize. He was connected to the Reyes history in ways Marcus had forgotten or been kept from knowing. "You're part of this," Marcus whispered, "part of the truth." The ground beneath him let out a soft, hollow tremor. Flint didn't move. "This isn't coincidence," Marcus said. "It's revelation." Wind swept across the hill, carrying dust and sagebrush scent, and something deeper. Something that felt like a whisper rising from the earth itself. Marcus swallowed hard. He didn't know whether the truth waiting beneath that sealed door would save him or break him. But he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't face it alone. Because Flint, this quiet, steady, mysterious gelding, had been part of the story long before Marcus realized he was living inside it, and the revelation had only begun. Marcus stood on that ridge longer than he meant to, Flint at his side, the silence between them dense with meaning neither of them could fully articulate. Every breath of wind felt loaded. Every tremor underfoot hinted at something buried, not just under the earth, but inside Marcus himself. He finally turned away, knowing he couldn't stay exposed up here. Clay's men were watching, and the hills carried whispers fast. Back at the ranch, the day unfolded with an unsettling stillness. Marcus tried to work, repairing fence posts, tightening barn hinges, clearing debris from a dried-out irrigation ditch. But Flint never strayed far. The horse remained in sight every moment, lifting his head each time Marcus paused, as if sensing when his thoughts drifted back to questions he wasn't ready to face. By late afternoon, the sky dimmed with a thin veil of clouds. Thunder rolled in the distance again, soft but steady, rumbling across an otherwise dry sky. Marcus paused mid-swing of his hammer. "No storm," he whispered. "Not yet." Flint pricked his ears toward the sound. The thunder didn't scare him. It stirred him. Marcus walked to the corral, leaning against the fence as Flint approached. The horse's steps were slow and deliberate, his eyes deep with something Marcus couldn't name. "You knew my grandfather," Marcus said quietly. "Didn't you?" Flint blinked once. "You were young," Marcus whispered, "but you were there." He remembered the day his father brought Flint home. Thin, barely trained, rescued from a ranch that had collapsed years after the mining accident. People said Flint was a good horse with a strange streak. Sensitive. Eerie. At the time, Marcus thought it was nonsense. Now he wasn't sure. "You've been carrying this secret longer than I have." Flint nudged Marcus's chest, firm but gentle. And something inside Marcus cracked open again. He had spent years believing he had nothing left to fight for, until Flint led him to that door. Until the land echoed with something older than his own lineage. Until Jim Hawthorne returned like a spirit carrying unfinished truth. He'd been blind. But not anymore. The sun dipped lower, edging toward the horizon. Marcus felt the shift in the air just before he heard the crunch of gravel on the road. Another truck. He stiffened, wiping sweat from his brow as the vehicle approached. Not Jim. Not Clay. Someone else. The truck parked near the barn. A woman stepped out. Mid-30s, dusty boots, wind-tangled hair, and a look of worn determination etched into her face. Marcus squinted. "Lena?" "Lena Torres." Veterinarian. One of the few people in town Marcus trusted. She'd grown up running wild through the hills, climbing rocks, studying animal tracks, whispering to stray horses like she was born to understand them. They hadn't talked much in recent years. Life drifted them apart. But she approached now with purpose. "I heard Clay's been sniffing around you," she said, not bothering with a greeting. Marcus sighed. "Word travels fast. It always does when he wants something." She eyed Flint. "And right now, he wants whatever that horse led you to." Marcus's jaw tightened. "People need to stop talking." Lena walked closer to Flint, letting him sniff her hand. She was one of the few people he trusted instantly. Flint exhaled softly, accepting her presence. "You look different," Lena murmured to the horse. "Focused. Like you've found something important." Marcus crossed his arms. "Lena, what's going on?" She hesitated just long enough for Marcus to feel the weight behind her silence. "There were readings," Lena said finally. "Strange ones. The wildlife officers picked them up near the ridge. Low-frequency vibrations, unexplained shifts in the soil, and animal behavior patterns they can't interpret." Marcus felt heat climb his neck. "Readings of what?" "We don't know, but animals avoid that ridge now. Deer, coyotes. Even the ravens won't land there." She paused, eyes cutting toward Flint. "Except him." Marcus swallowed. "Because he was there before." Lena nodded slowly. "Because he remembers something." Flint stepped closer to Marcus again, brushing against him protectively. Lena watched them, and something softened in her expression. "He trusts you, more than he has trusted anyone in years." Marcus didn't respond. He didn't know how to describe the bond that had formed, how it felt less like trust and more like recognition. Lena lowered her voice. "Be careful, Marcus. Clay's not just asking questions, he's hiring men, bringing equipment, big machinery. If he believes there's something under your ridge, he'll tear your land apart to get it." Marcus felt anger pulse beneath his skin. "He won't touch the ridge." Lena stepped closer, eyes serious. "You can't fight him alone." Marcus looked at Flint.
"I'm not."
Lena followed his gaze and nodded, understanding more in that single glance than anyone else in town could. But then she hesitated again. "There's one more thing," she said. Marcus met her eyes. "Tell me." "Someone broke into the courthouse records yesterday," Lena whispered. "They were looking for old land surveys. One's tied to the Reyes property. They pulled your grandfather's maps." Marcus's breath caught. "Clay. It had to be Clay." "They're tracing the fault lines," Lena added. "They're looking for something specific." Marcus felt the world narrow. "They won't find it," he said. Lena frowned. "Why?" Marcus exhaled, long and slow. "Because the land doesn't want them to." Lena stared at him, unsure whether to question it. But Flint, steady, silent, Flint lifted his head and let out a low, resonant sound that rolled across the ranch like an answer. Lena shivered. "He knows something." Marcus nodded. "He's known from the start." The air shifted again, carrying that same faint metallic hum. Marcus felt beneath his boots at the ridge. It vibrated through the boards of the fence, humming low and steady. Lena stepped back. "That's not normal." "No," Marcus whispered, "it's not." Flint stomped the ground once firm, commanding eyes locked on Marcus. Lena looked between them. "He wants you to go back." Marcus nodded. "I know." The truth was rising, pressing against the seams of the earth, pushing through whispers and warnings. And Marcus felt destiny tightening around him like a rope, pulling him forward. Lena touched his arm. "If you go up there, Marcus, you won't be the same when you come back." Marcus looked at Flint. "Good," he said. "I'm tired of being the man I've been." Thunder rolled again. No clouds, no lightning, just the deep, trembling voice of the land awakening. Flint lifted his head higher, nostrils flaring. The revelation wasn't finished, not even close. And what waited beneath the ridge was about to change everything. Marcus thought he knew about his family, his land, and the horse standing beside him. The days that followed unfolded like the tightening of a rope, slow at first, then with steady, undeniable pressure. Marcus woke each morning before sunrise, the same restless pull dragging him back toward the ridge. And every morning, Flint was already awake, already watching, already sensing the shift in the land. What began as tension soon became training. Not the kind taught by manuals or old ranching books. Something older, something instinctive, something written in the dust, in the wind, in the hollow echo beneath the foothills. It started subtle. Marcus would lead Flint across the property, testing how the horse reacted to different terrain. Dry ground, rocky patches, old creek beds. Flint hesitated near nothing, except the far east corner of the ranch, where the soil felt loose and unsettled. Marcus took note. So did Flint. Every day, they pushed a little farther. Every evening, they returned to the ridge. And every night, the tremors beneath the sealed door grew stronger. What worried Marcus wasn't the vibration. It was Flint's reaction to it. Sometimes Flint approached the ridge with calm, steady purpose. Other times, he froze. Muscles tight, ears pricked, nostrils wide, like something powerful was moving beneath the earth, and speaking a language only he understood. Every time Flint reacted, Marcus forced himself to watch closely, to learn. He realized something startling. Flint wasn't guiding him to the ridge. Flint was preparing him for it. And Marcus didn't know whether to feel honored or afraid. One afternoon, as the sun blazed across the hills, Marcus led Flint down a narrow wash that opened into a hidden pocket of land. The ground here felt strange, harder, almost metallic beneath the dust. When Flint stepped onto it, he stiffened, lowering his head, snorting sharply. Marcus stepped closer. "What is it? What do you feel?" Flint pawed the ground once. A hollow thunk, similar to the ridge, but weaker, smaller. Marcus knelt, brushing the surface. It wasn't wood, like the sealed door, nor rock. Something in between, stone shaped by human hands, weathered smooth over decades. "Another entrance?" Marcus whispered. "Or a marker?" Flint didn't respond. Instead, he lifted his head high, breathing in slow, deep pulls of air, ears twisting toward the ridge, as though waiting for an answer from the land itself. A low rumble rolled across the hills. No clouds, no lightning, only the trembling voice of earth shifting beneath the surface. Flint reacted instantly, muscles quivering, eyes wide, hooves digging into the dirt for grounding. Marcus steadied him, hands firm on the reins. "Easy. I'm here. I'm right here." The moment hung heavy in the air, vibrating between them like a single struck note. The tremor faded. Flint stilled. But Marcus knew something had changed. The land was no longer whispering. It was calling, and the call was getting louder. 2 days later, the threats from Clay sharpened. Marcus found fresh boot prints near the north fence line. His cattle gate had been left open. One of the troughs was smashed. Tracks from a heavy truck led toward the ridge, but stopped short, just far enough for someone to watch the foothills without being seen. Clay's men were scouting the land, measuring distances, marking trails. Marcus burned with anger, but Flint sensed something deeper danger. The gelding stayed glued to Marcus's side, never relaxing, never grazing long enough to lose awareness. One evening, as the sunset bled red across the hills, Marcus tightened Flint's cinch and climbed into the saddle. His hands trembled slightly, though his voice stayed steady. "We can't let him get ahead of us," Marcus murmured. "We've got to move faster, learn faster." Flint shifted under him, ready. "Let's go." They rode hard, not reckless, purposeful, not in fear, out of necessity. Marcus pushed Flint up steep ridges, through narrow washes, across uneven slopes where loose rock threatened to slip out from beneath their hooves. And Flint handled it all with the confidence of a creature shaped by the land itself. Each night, they returned to the sealed entrance. Each night, Marcus studied it a little more, mapping the boards, measuring the airflow, counting the vibrations. Jim visited again, briefly, delivering supplies Marcus didn't remember asking for: rope, picks, lanterns, old maps. He never stayed long, always disappearing before dusk. And each time he came, his warning grew sharper. "You're waking something, Marcus," he said one evening. "I don't know if it's good or bad, but the land is listening, and so is Clay." Marcus didn't answer. He just tightened his grip on Flint's reins. The emotional bond between Marcus and Flint deepened with every test the land threw at them. When a storm rolled across the valley, lightning splitting the sky even though the ridge remained dry, Flint stood beside Marcus instead of running for cover. When the wind howled through the canyon late one night, Flint pressed against Marcus's shoulder until the trembling earth quieted. And when Marcus woke from nightmares, visions of men trapped underground, echoes pounding through darkness, Flint was there waiting outside his door, steady breath filling the night with reassurance. "You're saving me," Marcus whispered one night, "and I don't even know why." Flint didn't move, didn't blink, didn't retreat. The horse simply stood with him, absorbing the weight of Marcus's grief, his fear, his hope, as though carrying it all was part of his purpose. And the more Marcus trained with Flint, pushing them both through terrain that demanded trust, the more he realized something undeniable. Flint wasn't learning from him. Marcus was learning from Flint, learning to sense tension in the earth, learning to anticipate shifts before they happened, learning to feel the land through something deeper than sight or sound. Some mornings, Marcus woke with an ache in his chest, fear that he would fail the legacy unfolding in front of him. But every time the fear rose, Flint answered it with presence, with patience, with quiet, unbreakable strength. The escalation came hard 3 days later. Marcus returned from fixing a distant fence line to find tire tracks near the ridge, deep, fresh, heavy. Clay's men had been right up against the sealed entrance, maybe even closer. A spike of panic shot through Marcus. He broke into a run, Flint racing beside him, hooves thundering across the ground like rolling drums. When they reached the ridge, Marcus dropped to his knees, brushing frantically over the spot where the boards lay buried. Some dirt had shifted. Not much, but enough to show someone had been there. Enough to show the land had almost been exposed. Flint blew out a furious breath, stomping the ground with a force Marcus had never seen before. Dust rose around them in a trembling cloud. Marcus pressed his forehead against Flint's neck. "They're getting closer," he whispered, "and we're running out of time." The ridge shuddered beneath their feet, soft, hollow, alive. The mine was waking. The land was stirring. And the storm, both the one under the earth and the one headed straight for Marcus, was no longer waiting. The escalation had begun. The ridge didn't feel quiet anymore, not even for a moment. By the next morning, the ground pulsed faintly beneath Marcus's boots, as if the hills were breathing. Not violently, no cracking earth or roaring shifts, but steady, intentional. Like something deep beneath the surface was rising closer with each passing day. Marcus tried to focus on normal chores, tried to fix fences, tried to sweep the barn and patch the wheat boards in the hayloft. But every quiet moment felt wrong, too hollow, too expectant. Flint felt it too. He'd stopped grazing, stopped resting, stopped wandering even a few feet away from Marcus. Instead, He shadowed Marcus constantly, watching the horizon like a sentinel guarding a fortress. By noon, Marcus gave up pretending anything was normal. "We train," he said, tightening Flint's cinch with nervous hands. "If Clay's men push closer, we need to be ahead of them. We need to understand more. Move faster. Trust harder." Flint shook his mane once, a decisive answer. They rode. Not for distance. This wasn't about covering land. It was about learning how the ground spoke. Marcus guided Flint through dry gulches, over uneven shale plates, across ridges where wind carved old scars into the earth. He watched every flick of Flint's ears, every tightening of muscle, every shift of weight. The horse was reading the land, the way his grandfather once had. With instinct, Marcus could only hope to match. Flint stopped abruptly on a high outcrop, staring at a distant patch of foothill where the soil looked darker, richer. Marcus followed his gaze and felt the shift, a faint throb beneath his boots. "You feel it?" Marcus whispered. Flint pawed the rock. Another hollow knock. Marcus knelt, pressing his palm against the stone. The vibration was stronger here, more focused, like a vein of something buried deep under the hills was pushing upward. "What are you trying to tell me?" Marcus asked softly. Flint's answer came in the form of a sudden jolt, his body tightening, head snapping toward the ridge. Marcus stood sharply. Something was wrong. A storm wind rolled over the valley, sudden and brutal, pushing dust across the plains in swirling sheets. But when Marcus looked up, the sky above them remained clear. No dark clouds, no shifting shadows, just a clean, endless blue. Yet the wind howled like a scream. Not natural, not weather. A warning. Flint backed up, hooves digging into the dirt, muscles twitching with tension Marcus could feel through the reins. "Easy," Marcus breathed. "We're okay." But they weren't okay. Not even close. The air grew colder, unnaturally cold. Flint's breath steamed in front of him even though the sun still beat down from overhead. The ridge trembled faintly, dust rising in tiny bursts across the top like a heartbeat pushing from below. Marcus felt his skin prick with fear he hadn't allowed himself to feel until now. The mind wasn't just waking, it was responding. To Flint. To him. To something his grandfather had started and left unfinished. A sudden crack echoed across the valley, a sharp, violent sound that made Marcus flinch, and Flint rear halfway before Marcus steadied him with both hands. "Whoa! Whoa! I've got you." Flint dropped back to the ground, trembling. Marcus ran his hand down Flint's neck, feeling the horse's heartbeat pounding like a drum. Then he heard it. Voices. Not human voices. Not clear words. But layered echoes, like the sound of metal striking stone deep underground. Dozens of rhythmic clangs. Then, silence. Then another wave of shaking. Marcus felt sick. "This is too much. We need to get off the ridge." He mounted quickly and urged Flint back toward the ranch. The horse didn't resist. He launched forward, galloping hard, as fast as Marcus had ever felt him move. The wind tore past them, the land pulsing beneath their hooves in a rhythm that felt both primal and wrong. By the time they reached the ranch, Marcus slid from the saddle, legs shaking. He pressed his forehead against Flint's, forcing his breath to slow. "I'm sorry, I pushed us too far today." Flint stood still, but Marcus could feel the horses trembling through his own bones. He stroked Flint's muzzle, grounding himself in the familiar smell of dust and sweat. For the first time since this began, Marcus felt something close to fear pressing at the back of his throat. "What if this isn't something I can handle?" he whispered. Flint leaned into him gently. "What if Clay gets there first?" Marcus continued. "What if the land called me too late? What if I can't protect it? Protect you?" Flint nudged his chest harder, almost stubbornly, as if refusing to let Marcus sink into doubt. "You think I can do this?" Marcus breathed. Flint didn't move away, and in that stillness, a spark of hope ignited in Marcus's chest. Small, fragile, but alive. 2 nights later, the storm finally came for real. Thunder rolled across the valley in booming waves. Lightning cracked open the sky, illuminating the ranch in white flashes that turned every shadow into something monstrous. Marcus fought to close the barn doors against the violent gusts, rain slicing sideways across his face. He winced as the wind ripped a shingle off the roof. "Flint!" he shouted over the roaring weather. The horse wasn't in the barn. Marcus ran into the storm, heart pounding, stumbling across muddy ground that sucked at his boots. "Flint!" A bolt of lightning split the sky, and in the harsh glow, Marcus saw him, standing not near the barn, not near the house, but at the ridge, at the exact spot of the sealed door. "No, Flint! Get back here!" Marcus sprinted toward him, soaked to the bone, wind slamming into him hard enough to nearly knock him sideways. Flint didn't move. He stood tall, planted, staring at the ridge like he was guarding it, like he was challenging the storm itself. Marcus reached him, grabbing his halter with trembling hands. "Are you insane? This storm could kill us both." Flint didn't flinch. He simply looked at Marcus with something like conviction. A lightning bolt struck the hillside only yards away. The earth shook violently beneath them. So strong, Marcus fell to one knee. Flint didn't move. Marcus followed the horse's gaze, and what he saw made his breath freeze. The ridge's surface had cracked. Not much, but enough to show a sliver of darkness beneath the wood. Enough to expose the edge of the sealed door. The land had opened itself. Marcus stared, rain streaming down his face, lightning illuminating the truth in violent flickers. "It's happening," he whispered. "It's really happening." Flint pressed against him, steadying him, protecting him. And Marcus realized something with a cold, shaking certainty. The land wasn't just waking. It was choosing. And if Marcus didn't answer soon, Clay would. The storm raged on, tearing across the valley with a fury that felt purposeful, almost sentient. Marcus clung to Flint, feeling the horse's heartbeat match his own, as destiny bore down on them like thunder. The moment had come. The point of no return. Marcus barely slept that night. Even after the storm passed and the valley fell silent again, the sound of cracking earth kept replaying in his mind. He sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, water dripping from his coat onto the wood floor, listening to the strange hum rising from the ridge. The vibration wasn't violent anymore. It was steady, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat deep beneath the soil. And Flint, soaked and trembling but uninjured, stood outside the window refusing to leave his post, not lying down, not hiding in the barn, guarding the ridge, guarding Marcus, guarding the truth. When dawn finally broke, Marcus forced himself outside. Flint was still there, head high and alert, as if he hadn't moved all night. Marcus walked to him, placing a hand on the horse's neck. "You stayed here through the whole storm," he whispered. "Watching over it, watching over me." Flint nudged him gently, exhaustion shimmering beneath the surface, but overshadowed by a deeper resolve. Marcus looked toward the foothills. The storm had carved channels through the soil. Mud had washed down the slope, exposing parts of the hillside that had been hidden for decades. The ridge entrance was partially uncovered. Not enough for anyone to see from a distance, but enough that Marcus could no longer pretend this was just coincidence. The land wasn't waiting. It was pushing. He took a step toward the ridge, but Flint blocked him with a sudden shift of his body. "No?" Marcus asked softly. Flint shook his head, nervous energy rippling through his legs. You think it's not time? Flint didn't move except to lower his head slowly, a gesture Marcus had learned meant caution. Not refusal, not fear, caution. Okay, Marcus breathed. Together, when the moment's right. He didn't understand how he knew that Flint meant it. He just did. The next few days moved like the tightening of a storm coil. The air grew heavier. The vibrations in the ground intensified, traveling through Marcus's boots like a whisper with teeth. Animals across the valley behaved strangely. Cattle clustered near water troughs, circling without reason. Birds avoided the foothills entirely. And Clay Hargrove escalated. Tracks appeared dangerously close to the ridge, deep ruts from heavy equipment, a scout's cigarette butt near the crest. Boot prints too large to be Carter's boy or any ranch hand Marcus knew. Marcus's anger brewed hotter each hour. He's getting bolder, Marcus said one evening, pacing in front of Flint. He thinks no one will stop him. Flint stomped his hoof, snorting sharply as if agreeing. The horse's reactions grew stronger each time Clay's men trespassed, ears pinned, head lifted, pacing the fence with a protective tension Marcus had never seen. Yeah, Marcus muttered, I'm tired of running too. But the more Marcus trained, the more he felt something else rising inside him. Something old, something inherited, something that felt like responsibility carved into his bones. Jim's words haunted him. Your grandfather sealed that place for a reason. But maybe Marcus wasn't meant to keep it sealed. Maybe he was meant to defend it, or uncover it, or understand it. He didn't know yet. But the ridge knew, Flint knew. And the land itself seemed to pulse with anticipation. The emotional setback came on the 5th day. Marcus had been pushing himself in Flint too hard. Long rides, harsh slopes, constant tension. He didn't sleep. He barely ate. He thought only of the ridge, of Clay, of the mine that hummed beneath the earth like a waking giant. So when Flint stumbled during a tight downhill climb, Marcus's heart nearly shattered. It wasn't a bad fall, just a slip on loose shale. But the sight of Flint's knee hitting the ground sent fear tearing through Marcus's chest. Whoa, whoa! Marcus dropped to the ground beside him. Are you hurt? Look at me, boy. Please look at me. Flint breathed heavily, eyes wide, shaken but not injured. Marcus checked his leg, his hoof, his joints. Not a scratch, not even swelling. But Marcus couldn't stop his hands from trembling. I pushed you too hard, he whispered, voice breaking. I did exactly what Clay would do, and I promised I'd never be that kind of man. Flint lifted his head and nudged Marcus's cheek with a soft, grounding touch, as if forgiving him instantly. But Marcus couldn't forgive himself as easily. I'm sorry, he whispered, pressing his forehead to Flint's. I forgot what matters. This isn't about rushing. It's about listening, trusting, moving with the land, not against it. Flint exhaled, breath warm against Marcus's skin. The setback became a turning point. From that moment on, Marcus trained differently, slower, smarter, with patience instead of desperation. He stopped pushing Flint beyond what the horse chose to give. He started letting Flint lead more often than he guided. And something extraordinary happened. Their movements synced, their instincts aligned. Their awareness fused into something almost seamless. Marcus began feeling the land's vibrations before Flint reacted. Flint responded to Marcus's voice without hesitation, without fear. Their bond evolved from trust into unity. Two beings acting as one. He didn't recognize himself when he caught their reflection in a pond at dusk. A man standing beside a horse who felt less like livestock and more like an extension of his own spirit. A man who no longer moved through the world alone. Then came the day the storm returned. Not a real storm, no clouds, no rain. A storm beneath the earth. Marcus and Flint were working the west slope when the ground shuddered violently enough to crack open a coarse seam. A low, thunderous moan rolled beneath the soil. Flint reared, eyes wild, hooves cutting through the air. Marcus held on tight, anchoring him. "Easy! I've got you!" The vibration intensified, rattling stones loose, shaking dust from the mesquite branches. Marcus grabbed Flint's halter and pressed his forehead against the horse's neck, grounding himself in the one constant he trusted. The tremor lasted nearly 30 seconds. When it stopped, Flint froze, not in fear, in focus. He stared at the ridge body, tall, alert, brimming with purpose. And Marcus understood. "It's time," he whispered. Flint let out a long, low breath. Destiny wasn't waiting anymore. It was pulling. Hard. Marcus swallowed his fear and nodded. "Tonight, when the moon rises, we go to the ridge." Flint stamped the ground once. Agreement. Unity. Resolve. Marcus spent the rest of the day preparing, not with tools but with intention. He wrote a letter to his mother in case something went wrong. He locked the barn. He tightened fences. He lit a lantern that burned into the dusk. And as night descended, he saddled Flint one more time. The ridge glowed faintly under the rising moon. "Whatever's waiting behind that door," Marcus whispered, "we face it together." Flint stepped forward, and they rode toward the ridge as the land pulsed beneath them like the beating heart of something ancient and awakening. The moment of truth was no longer someday. It was now. The climax was calling. Moonlight washed over the foothills like silver fire as Marcus and Flint climbed the slope for the final time. The world around them felt unnaturally still. Even the wind held its breath. Every hoofstep echoed louder than it should have, as if the land recognized where they were going and braced for what was coming. Marcus felt it too, a pulse beneath the surface, a hum rising through the soil, a truth waiting in the dark. But it wasn't just the ridge calling him tonight. Trouble was waiting as well. Flint stopped halfway up the slope, ears twisting sharply toward the valley behind them. Marcus turned in the saddle, and his stomach dropped. Headlights. Several sets. Moving fast. Turning off the main road and cutting across open fields like a pack of wolves closing in on wounded prey. Clay's trucks. Marcus's heart slammed against his ribs. He's moving tonight. He knows. Flint snorted, anger rippling through his body. Marcus tightened the reins. Then we get there first. They surged up the ridge, the climb steeper than Marcus remembered. Rocks slid out from under Flint's hooves, dust rising in frantic clouds. Marcus leaned forward, gripping the saddle horn, pushing Flint onward even as the horse breathed hard through flared nostrils. Below them, engines roared closer, tearing across land that wasn't theirs, headlights bouncing wildly as trucks climbed toward the foothills. Clay wasn't hiding anymore. He was coming for the ridge openly, forcefully, without care for consequence. Marcus's voice cut through the night. "Faster, Flint! Go!" Flint gathered every ounce of strength left in him and charged upward, hooves pounding like thunder in the moonlit dark. Marcus felt the vibrations through the saddle, the land responding, calling, awakening beneath them. They reached the crest just as the first truck rounded the bend below. Marcus jumped off, breath sharp, eyes wide. The sealed door was more exposed now. The storm had ripped back layers of soil. Heavy boards jutted out like ribs, uncovered in a grave. The earth beneath the entrance glowed faintly, an eerie, muted shimmer pulsing with each tremor of the ridge. Marcus swallowed hard. This is it. But it wasn't just the land waiting for him. A voice shouted below. "Marcus Reyes!" Clay. Marcus turned, rage sparking inside his chest as Clay's truck skidded to a stop. Men jumped out. 3 of them, armed with tools meant for breaking, prying, tearing. Clay strode forward with the smug confidence of a man who believed the world bowed to his will. "Well now," Clay drawled, stepping into the moonlight. "Looks like you found the door for me." Marcus moved instinctively, putting himself between Clay and the sealed entrance. "You're trespassing on Reyes land," Marcus said. "Turn around." Clay laughed, the sound sharp and cold. "This land won't be yours much longer, and whatever's under that ridge belongs to the man with the means to take it." Flint stomped the ground, ears pinned flat, body coiled with fury Marcus had never seen in him. Clay's eyes flicked toward the horse. "That animal's worth more trouble than he's worth. Should have put him down the moment he started running wild." Marcus stepped forward, fists clenched. "Don't you touch him." Clay smirked. "Why? He's just a horse." "No," Marcus said, voice low and steady. "He's the one who brought me here. Not for money, not for power, for truth." Clay scoffed. "Truth doesn't pay debts." Marcus's eyes hardened. "Some debts aren't paid with money." Clay signaled his men. "Move him. I want that entrance exposed." Two men approached. Flint lunged before Marcus even spoke, rearing high, hooves cutting through the air. The men stumbled back, swearing, scrambling away from the enraged gelding. Clay took a step back too, only for a moment, but enough to show a flicker of fear. "You can't stop this," Clay barked. "This land was wasted in your hands." "I'll make something of it." "This land was never yours," Marcus growled. "It was protected long before you ever thought to take it." Clay's jaw tightened. "Enough. Get that horse out of the way." The men advanced again, this time with ropes and poles. Marcus reached into his jacket, pulling out his grandfather's folded sketch, the map of the ridge, the marks that only Flint had understood. "You see this?" Marcus said, voice shaking with conviction. "My grandfather sealed that mine. My father guarded it. And Flint, he's been connected to it longer than any of us. This isn't just history, Clay. It's legacy." Clay rolled his eyes. "Legacy doesn't matter when I own the rights." "You don't own what the land refuses to give," Marcus shot back. And right then, the ground trembled. Not a subtle vibration this time. A deep, resonant quake that rippled through the ridge like the earth itself was speaking with a voice older than all of them. The boards over the mine groaned. Dust burst upward. A beam cracked down the middle. Clay stumbled, grabbing his truck door to balance himself. His men froze, staring at the ridge with wide, terrified eyes. "What the hell?" one muttered. Flint stood tall, fearless, staring directly at the entrance as blue-white light flickered beneath the boards. Soft at first, then pulsing brighter, illuminating the cracks like veins of energy. Marcus felt his breath catch. "It's waking," he whispered. Clay's fear twisted into greed. "Get that door open, now!" "No! No!" Marcus lunged forward. "You don't understand." Flint moved faster. With a powerful leap, he planted himself squarely between the men and the mine entrance, hooves slamming down in front of the largest crack. The earth responded instantly. A shockwave burst outward from the sealed door, knocking Marcus to his knees and sending Clay's men tumbling backward. Clay staggered, cursing, eyes wild. "What is that?" he shouted. Marcus pushed himself upright. "It's what my family protected. What yours should have respected." Clay's face twisted with rage. "Move the horse!" But no one dared step closer. Flint lowered his head, ears pinned, nostrils flaring, guarding the entrance, the way generations of Reyes had guarded the land. The ridge trembled again, deeper, louder, pulsing like a heartbeat connected to Flint himself. The connection was undeniable now. Flint wasn't reacting to the mine, he was answering it. Marcus felt it surge through him. Fear, awe, destiny, all crashing into one undeniable truth. Flint wasn't just part of this story. He was the key to it. Clay shouted again, desperate. "Stop them! Move!" But his voice was drowned out by a final thunderous crack as the sealed board shifted, splitting wider, releasing a concentrated burst of shimmering air that washed over the ridge like a breath escaping the earth after decades of silence. The climax had begun, and there was no turning back. The crack in the ridge widened with a low, guttural groan, like the earth itself was waking from a decades-long slumber. Dust burst upward in swirling clouds, illuminated by the eerie, shimmering light that leaked from beneath the broken boards. The glow wasn't bright. It wasn't blinding, but it felt alive, pulsing in slow, rhythmic waves that moved through the ground and up through Marcus's bones. Clay stumbled backward, eyes wide, face twisted in something that hovered between awe and terror. "What did you do?" Clay shouted, voice cracking. Marcus didn't answer. He couldn't, because he was staring at Flint, who hadn't moved, hadn't flinched, hadn't shown 1 ounce of fear. The gelding stood like a guardian carved from the land itself, the glowing fissure reflected in his dark eyes.
"Flint,"
Marcus whispered, frozen in place.
"You're connected to it, aren't you?"
Flint lowered his head, the shimmering air rippling around him like a warm breath greeting an old friend. Clay's men began backing away. One of them muttered, "This ain't worth it, Clay. That ain't natural." Clay snapped, "Shut up and hold your ground." But even Clay's voice trembled. Marcus felt the ridge pulse again, stronger this time, knocking loose more dirt, widening the opening as if the sealed mine no longer wished to stay hidden. The boards groaned, the earth rumbled, the light intensified. Something beneath the ridge wanted to be seen. Flint stepped forward. "No, wait!" Marcus reached for him. But Flint wasn't running toward the crack. He was positioning himself in front of Marcus, shielding him. The realization hit Marcus like a punch to the chest. Flint wasn't trying to enter the mine. He was protecting Marcus from whatever was awakening. "Get back!" Clay shouted at his men. "Open it up now, before they do!" Marcus's anger surged. "Clay, you don't understand what you're dealing with." Clay sneered. "I understand money, and something down there is worth a hell of a lot." "No!" Marcus stepped forward. "This isn't about profit. This is about my family, about the land, about what should have stayed protected long ago." Clay scoffed. "Spare me the speeches. Move that horse, or I swear I'll—" Before Clay could finish, the ridge exploded with a low, thunderous crack, deep and resonant like a war drum sounding across the valley. A blast of shimmering air burst outward. Marcus was thrown backward, hit the ground hard, and rolled across the dirt. His ears rang. His vision blurred. The world shook like thunder was beneath his skin. He scrambled upright, coughing through the dust. "Flint!" Marcus shouted. Through the haze, he saw him, still standing, unmoved, head lowered against the shockwave, protecting Marcus with his body angled between him and the fissure. "Good boy, Marcus whispered shakily. Clay wasn't as lucky. He was sprawled against his truck, stunned, one of his boots slipping on loose shale. His men were scrambling on hands and knees, fear etched in every line of their faces. "Boss, we need to leave," one shouted. "This place is cursed." "It's not cursed," Clay screamed back. "There's something down there, something valuable. Give me a breaker bar." But no one moved, because the sealed board shifted again, then lifted, just slightly, barely an inch, but enough to reveal a slice of darkness so black it swallowed even the shimmering light around it. A breath of cold air spilled upward, brushing Marcus's face with a chilling awareness. The mine wasn't empty. It wasn't dead. It was breathing. Flint's ears shot forward, eyes locked on the opening with laser focus. Marcus pushed himself fully upright, his heart pounding. "Flint, what do you see?" The horse took a step forward, slow, deliberate, fearless. Marcus followed, placing a hand on Flint's flank. The horse didn't flinch. He stood firm, rooted, as if the ground beneath him recognized him, welcomed him. The shimmering light from below flickered across the horse's coat, dancing like embers on the wind. And suddenly, Marcus saw it. Something deep in the shaft. A faint glow, not metallic, not artificial, alive. Marcus's breath stalled. "It's not ore." Not what Clay thinks. He dropped to one knee, peering into the crack. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat, echoing up the tunnel walls. Veins of soft, blue-white energy traced through stone, branching like roots or lightning frozen in time. Jim had been right. This wasn't treasure. This wasn't mineral. It was a fault line of something ancient, something the earth had carried for centuries. Clay staggered upright, gripping the cracked boards. If it glows, it sells. "Clay, stop!" Marcus shouted. "If you break that, you'll destroy everything. Your land, mine, the whole ridge." Clay raised his boot and stomped down on the nearest board. "No!" Marcus lunged forward. But Flint moved faster. With a sharp, explosive burst of motion, Flint threw his body into Clay, knocking him backward into the dirt. Clay rolled, gasping, scrambling to get up, rage twisting his face. "You damn animal!" Marcus stepped between them. "He saved your life, Clay. You have no idea what's under here." But Clay was beyond reason. He reached into the cab of his truck, grabbing a metal tool. Rusted. Heavy. Meant for prying. "Get away from that mine!" Clay shouted. "No!" Marcus said, standing tall. "This ends tonight!" Clay raised the tool, and the ground answered. A violent tremor ripped through the ridge. The crack widened. The boards split apart. A surge of blue-white energy shot upward, illuminating the night like a second moon. Marcus shielded his face. Clay dropped the tool, falling to his knees. Flint stood tall, mane whipping in the rising wind. The mine? The waking earth. The legacy, all converged in a blinding bloom of light, and then, as the tremor peaked, Marcus heard it. A voice. Not human, not audible, but felt. A whisper that wasn't a whisper. A memory not his own. Words carried through Flint. A protector returns. Marcus staggered, breath stolen. Flint stepped forward toward the opening, and the light bent toward him, as if recognizing him, greeting him, honoring him. Clay stared in horror. What is this?" Marcus's voice trembled with something deeper than fear. "The truth. The truth. My grandfather died protecting." The light faded slowly, pulsing quieter, retreating into the earth like a heartbeat settling back into rest. But the message remained. The land had chosen. Flint had accepted. And Marcus had been called to stand between greed and legacy. The climax wasn't just a confrontation. It was awakening. A bond sealed not by training, not by suffering, but by destiny. Clay fell silent as the last of the trembling stopped. Marcus stood tall, Flint beside him. The ridge had spoken, and nothing would ever be the same again. The ridge fell into a heavy silence. One so deep it felt like the valley itself was holding its breath. The last echoes of the tremor faded into the night, leaving behind only the faint glow pulsing from the cracked entrance. Flint stood at the edge of the fissure, steady and unshaken, as if he had known this moment for years. Clay, on the other hand, was shaking. His men huddled several yards back, whispering in frantic tones, glancing at the ridge like it had become something alive and watching. Marcus straightened slowly, his breath still uneven from the shockwave, but his conviction steadier than it had ever been. The truth of the land, the truth of his family, burned inside him now like a lantern he couldn't extinguish. Clay pushed himself upright, face pale, voice trembling. That isn't natural." Marcus stepped toward him. "No, it's not. It's sacred." Clay shook his head, refusing to accept the reality in front of him. I don't care what it is. If it glows, it sells. Those veins, those lights, there's something down there the world hasn't seen before." Flint snorted sharply, stamping his hoof. The sound cracked through the air like a warning shot. Marcus's voice dropped low. "Clay, the earth just warned you, and Flint just saved your life." Clay's desperation sharpened into something violent. "You think I'm walking away from this? You think I'll let you keep it? A broke rancher? A man who can't even pay his taxes?" Marcus cut him off, stepping closer until only inches separated them. "My father protected this land. My grandfather sealed that mine with his own hands. I didn't understand why until tonight." He pointed toward the glowing crack. "Whatever that is down there, it isn't meant to be mined. It isn't meant to be owned. It's meant to be respected." Clay's breath hitched, fury boiling beneath the thin layer of his fear. "Respect doesn't feed a ranch, Marcus." "Neither does dying," Marcus shot back. Clay's jaw tightened. "Move! That horse!" Flint did not move, not an inch. Instead, he lowered his head and took a single step forward, placing himself directly between Clay and the entrance. His muscles rippled with tension. His breath came out in sharp bursts, his ears pinned back with warning. Clay swallowed hard but took a step forward anyway, trying to reclaim control with bravado he didn't feel. "You don't scare me!" Clay spat at the horse. Marcus's voice crackled with something fierce and ancient. "He doesn't have to scare you. The land already did." Clay hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. Then greed blinded him again. He lunged for the nearest board, grabbing it with both hands, intent on tearing it free. Marcus reacted without thinking. "Clay, stop!" But Flint moved before Marcus could. The gelding let out a roar. Yes, a roar. Something deep and primal that thundered off the ridge walls. He reared back, hooves slashing the air with a power Marcus had never witnessed in his life. The wind whipped wildly around them, blowing dirt in spirals as the ridge pulsed again, faint but angry. Clay stumbled backward, tripping over his own boots and falling hard onto the rocks. The ridge answered with a low, rumbling growl, like a warning from the belly of the earth. Marcus grabbed Flint's reins, grounding the horse. "Easy!" "Easy, boy." Flint lowered his front legs again, breathing hard but steady, eyes locked on Clay as if daring him to try again. Clay pushed himself back onto his knees, eyes wide with something Marcus had never seen in him before. Not greed, not anger, fear, real fear. "What? What is that thing?" Clay whispered, staring past Marcus at the crack. Marcus turned his head slowly, facing the faint, pulsing light beneath the partially opened boards. "It's not a thing," Marcus said. "It's a truth. And it doesn't want to be taken. It wants to be protected." Clay looked from the fissure to Flint, then to Marcus again. His breath trembled. His confidence broke like glass. "I didn't know," Clay whispered. "No," Marcus said gently. "You didn't want to know." A long silence followed, broken only by the faint hum rising from the mine. Clay's men exchanged looks. None of them moved closer. Some slowly stepped back toward their trucks, their courage draining beneath the weight of what they had witnessed. Clay stood at last, slowly, shakily, like a man waking from a nightmare. His shoulders slumped. His voice cracked. I thought it was money. Marcus shook his head. Sometimes the land holds more than wealth. Sometimes it holds memory. Sometimes danger. Sometimes legacy. Clay stared at the ridge, the glow reflecting in his eyes. He looked smaller now, more human, less invincible. "What do you want from me, Marcus?" Clay asked, defeated. Marcus stepped forward, firm but not cruel. "Leave this land alone, and tell your men to stay away. Whatever's down there shouldn't be disturbed. Not by you, not by me, not by anyone." Clay swallowed, wiped his mouth with a trembling hand. "And if I do?" Marcus looked to Flint. Flint held still, watching, judging, waiting. "If you do," Marcus said, "the land will stay quiet, and you'll walk away with your life and your men safe." Clay lowered his eyes. "And if I don't?" The ridge trembled again, just once, enough to send pebbles skittering down the slope. Clay didn't need Marcus to answer. He nodded slowly. "All right, I won't come back. None of us will." Marcus studied him, ensuring he meant it. Clay's shoulders sagged under a weight Marcus could see but not name. He turned toward his men. "Let's go," Clay said hoarsely. Nobody argued. They scrambled into the trucks and peeled away, engines roaring as they fled the foothills like they were escaping a living monster. Clay climbed into his truck last, pausing only once to look back at Marcus and Flint, standing together before the shimmering crack in the earth. His voice came out shaky. "Be careful, Marcus." Marcus nodded. "You too." Clay drove off, gravel spitting under his tires. Silence slowly reclaimed the ridge. Marcus let out a long breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. His legs trembled. His hands shook. The fear, the adrenaline, the near disaster, all of it washed over him in a crashing wave. He turned toward Flint. The horse was calm now, still, watching him with that deep, ancient knowing. "You saved us," Marcus whispered. "And you saved them, too." Flint lowered his head and pressed it gently against Marcus's chest. Marcus wrapped his arms around the horse's neck, shaking with relief he didn't bother to hide. The ridge pulsed once more, soft this time, like a heartbeat settling back into rest. The confrontation was over. Clay was gone. The land was safe, for now. But as Marcus stood there in the moonlit silence, hand pressed to Flint's warm coat, he understood one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. The night after the confrontation settled into a deep, uneasy quiet. Not a threatening silence, but the kind that follows a storm. Heavy, reflective, holding the weight of everything that almost happened. Marcus and Flint stayed on the ridge long after Clay's trucks disappeared, neither of them willing to move until the land itself calmed. When the final tremor faded into stillness, Marcus knelt beside the cracked entrance, brushing away loose dirt with slow, steady hands. The glow beneath the boards dimmed now, pulsing softly like a heartbeat drifting into sleep. "It's resting," Marcus whispered. "Just like you." Flint exhaled, his warm breath curling into the cool night air. Marcus straightened. "We'll protect it. I'll protect it. That's a promise." Flint pressed his muzzle into Marcus's shoulder again, tired but trusting. By the time they made it back to the ranch, dawn was breaking. The sky washed in pale pinks and soft purples, glowing gently against the weary landscape. Marcus felt exhaustion tugging at him from every direction, but there was a peace inside him that he couldn't explain. He had faced something impossible. He had stood his ground, and he had chosen the land over desperation. He wasn't the man he had been a week ago. Word spread through Arroyo Bend by mid-morning. Not the real story. No one would ever believe that. Not glowing fissures. Not ancient energy. Not Flint standing guard like a sentinel from another age. But people talked anyway. Some said Clay had been injured. Some said the ridge nearly collapsed. Some said Marcus had confronted Clay in a physical fight and won. By noon, even the feed store was buzzing. When Marcus walked in with Flint beside him, dusty, tired, but upright as ever, the room fell quiet. Carter stared at him with wide eyes, and for once, no one muttered under their breath. Marcus grabbed a bag of oats and carried it to the counter. Carter cleared his throat. "Heard you had some trouble up on the ridge." Marcus kept his voice calm. "Clay trespassed. I asked him to leave." "That storm was something else," Carter said, uneasy. "They say the ground cracked open up there." Marcus didn't confirm or deny it. He simply said, "The land spoke, and everyone walked away safe." Carter studied him. "You look different, Marcus. Stronger." "I feel different," Marcus said quietly. Flint nudged Marcus's shoulder, lowering his head until his cheek brushed Marcus's arm. A soft gesture. A grounding one. People in the store stared. Not at Marcus, but at Flint. Not with fear. Not with superstition. With respect. Because whatever story had spread through town, one thing was clear. Flint had stood by Marcus through something dangerous. And everyone could see the bond between man and horse now, shimmering like a truth no one needed explained. That afternoon, Clay Hargrove showed up at Marcus's ranch. Not with his trucks, not with his men, but alone. Marcus found him standing by the fence line, hat in his hands, eyes lowered to the dust. He looked smaller than Marcus had ever seen him. Exhausted. Haunted. "Clay," Marcus said, approaching slowly. "You shouldn't be here. Not after." Clay held up a hand. "I'm not here to fight. I'm not here for the land." He swallowed, voice cracking when he spoke again. "I'm here to apologize." The words hit Marcus like a blow he didn't see coming. Clay kept staring at the ground, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. "I crossed a line. I almost destroyed something I didn't understand. I almost got my men killed. And you saved us." Marcus shook his head softly. "Flint saved us." Clay lifted his gaze just enough to glance at the horse standing a few feet away, ears forward, watching the conversation. "I thought he was trouble," Clay admitted. "I said some things I shouldn't have, hurtful things." "He was protecting the ridge," Marcus said. "He wasn't trying to cause trouble." Clay nodded slowly. "I know that now." He took a shuddering breath. "Marcus, I never believed in all that talk about the land being alive, or chosen people, or destiny. But that night, that light, that tremor," he closed his eyes, shaking his head. "The land warned me, and I didn't listen." Marcus rested a hand on the fence rail. "You're listening now!" Clay's eyes softened, years of arrogance peeling away. "I'm sorry, Marcus, truly. And I'll tell anyone who tries to push into that ridge to stay clear. That place isn't meant for men like me." Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. Forgiveness was hard, but holding a grudge was heavier. "Thank you," Marcus said. Clay nodded once deep, genuine, then forced a fragile smile. "Guess you, Reyes, were right all along. Some things shouldn't be touched." He tipped his hat to Marcus, to Flint, and walked away quietly. No threats, no demands, no pride left to protect. Redemption in its simplest form. News spread through the town that Clay had backed off, that he told his men to stay away from the foothills, that he warned others not to trespass, not to dig, not to touch the sealed ridge. People whispered, some in awe, some in confusion. But the result was the same. The ridge was safe now. The land was quiet. And for the first time since he inherited the ranch, Marcus felt something close to stability. A week after the confrontation, people began treating Marcus differently. With respect, with gratitude. They asked for help fixing fences, asked Flint's story, asked Marcus's story. Some said he was brave. Some said he was foolish. Some said he was chosen. Marcus didn't think about labels. He thought about the truth. He had answered when the land called. Later that week, Marcus visited his mother. She sat near the window again, watching sunlight flicker through wind chimes. When Marcus entered, her eyes brightened just a little. "Something's changed," she said softly. "I can feel it." Marcus knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. "You were right, Ma, about the land, about the mine, about me." She smiled faintly, squeezing his hand with what little strength she had. "The land doesn't choose wrong." Tears stung Marcus's eyes, but he didn't look away. "I'm going to protect it, Ma. Just like Grandpa did. Just like Dad tried to." She nodded. "I always knew you would." Flint waited outside, visible through the window. His head lifted when Marcus turned to look at him, as if sensing the emotional weight of the moment.
"He's special,"
Marcus whispered. His mother smiled again.
"He's part of the story."
"Just like you." Marcus pressed her hands to his forehead, breathing through the emotion rising in his chest. When he stood to leave, his mother whispered,
"You look like your father today."
Marcus swallowed hard. "I feel like him too." Back at the ranch, Marcus found Jim Hawthorne sitting on the porch steps, a quiet smile on his weathered face. "Told you the land would test you," Jim said. "And you passed." Marcus sat beside him, exhaling. "It wasn't just me. Flint, he knew things I never could." Jim nodded. "Some horses are guides, some are guardians, and some, rare few, are bridges between what we understand and what we forget. That gelding of yours is all three." Flint approached the porch, standing before the two men with peaceful confidence. Marcus scratched Flint's neck. "He saved my life." Jim chuckled. "No, son, you saved each other." The wind carried a soft breeze across the ranch. Warm, restorative, gentle. The kind that felt like blessing instead of warning. Marcus leaned back on his hands, letting the peace of the land wash over him. The danger had passed. The truth had surfaced. The ridge was safe. And, for the first time in years, Marcus felt something settle inside him. Something like relief. Something like healing. Something like redemption. But more than anything, something like hope. Years passed quietly after the ridge awakened. Not all at once, not in dramatic waves, just in steady, gentle seasons that reshaped Marcus's life. The way wind reshapes a canyon. Slow, patient, with purpose only visible in hindsight. The town changed too. People still whispered about the night the ridge cracked open and sent a shockwave through Arroyo Bend, but the story softened over time. Some claimed Marcus saved Clay's life. Others believed Flint sensed an earthquake before anyone else. Most simply agreed on one thing: the Reyes Ranch had become a place of mystery and protection. And Marcus, once seen as the struggling, solitary rancher, was now someone people looked to for guidance, for quiet strength, for the kind of steady presence the valley had been missing for decades. But the greatest changes happened on the ranch itself. Marcus rebuilt the barn, repaired every fence, reseeded the pastures his father once worked, and each morning, as the sun rose over the foothills, he rode the land with a sense of purpose he'd never known before. And always, always, Flint was beside him. The bond between them grew deeper as the years settled across their lives. Marcus began to sense the land, the way Flint did not perfectly, Not instinctively, but enough to feel the tug of weather shifts before they arrived, enough to trust where Flint chose to step, enough to understand when the ridge rumbled softly in the night. It wasn't just training anymore. It was partnership. It was guardianship. It was legacy. But time changes even the strongest of creatures. As the years rolled on, Flint's coat took on a lighter sheen of gray around the muzzle. His once unbreakable stride softened into a dignified pace. His eyes, still sharp, still knowing, carried a depth shaped by a lifetime of walking the land's quiet paths. Marcus noticed the changes the way a man notices the thinning of his own father's hands. Slow at first, then suddenly all at once. He adjusted their routines. No more steep ridges. No more long pasture runs. They rode the valley floor instead, Flint's pace steady and content. Marcus brushed him longer each evening, feeling the horse's ribs a little more clearly beneath his fingers. Flint didn't resist the changes. He accepted them, gracefully, quietly, as if he understood the season of his life was shifting into something softer. One morning, Marcus woke before dawn to find Flint lying in the pasture, head lifted toward the rising sun. Not in distress, not in fear. In peace. Marcus knelt beside him, stroking his face gently. "Hey, boy. Didn't mean to keep you out here all night." Flint blinked slowly, his breath warm but weaker than usual. Marcus swallowed hard. "You want to watch the sunrise, huh? One more time?" The horse shifted just enough to rest his head in Marcus's lap. A gesture so deliberate, so familiar. Marcus felt his heart fracture in a way he hadn't expected. He knew. Flint knew. The land knew. The moment had come. Marcus stayed with him as the first streaks of light kissed the foothills. Birds began to stir. The valley breathed awake. The ridge pulsed once softly, gently, as if acknowledging one of its greatest guardians. Marcus stroked Flint's neck, voice trembling. "You saved me. You saved all of us. I'm here because of you. I hope you know that." Flint exhaled a long, slow breath, warm at first, then fading into stillness. The sun rose, and Flint didn't. Marcus bowed his head, tears falling into the horse's mane. He didn't speak for a long time. Didn't move. Didn't try to hold back the grief that consumed him. He let it break him open, let it carve through him with the same slow, powerful precision the land had carved the valley itself. Eventually, when the sun was fully above the horizon, Marcus placed a hand gently over Flint's eyes and whispered, "Thank you." People from Arroyo Bend came out in quiet waves throughout the day. Lena arrived first, laying her hand on Marcus's shoulder without a word. Jim came next, hat pressed to his chest, eyes shining with respect for a creature he always knew was extraordinary. Even Clay came, standing at a distance, head bowed in subdued humility. They helped Marcus dig the resting place on a small rise overlooking the foothills, a peaceful spot shaded by a lone cottonwood tree. Marcus placed Flint's favorite halter beside him, worn and frayed from years of morning rides. When the last shovel of earth settled, the wind brushed gently through the valley, soft, warm, almost like a whisper. A thank you, a farewell, a blessing. Marcus stayed long after everyone left. He sat in the grass, staring at the mound of earth bathed in fading sunlight. He didn't feel alone. He felt guided, completed, forever changed. A few days later, Marcus stood on the ridge, looking at the sealed crack. It no longer glowed. It no longer rumbled. It simply existed, quiet, watchful, waiting. Marcus touched the earth above it. "He's with you now. I'll take care of the rest." And for the first time, he felt the land answer him, not in tremors or pulses, in warmth, approval, recognition, legacy. Years passed again. Marcus's hair went gray along the temples. His shoulders thickened with age. But his posture, his voice, his spirit, those grew steadier than ever. People sought him out for wisdom, for stories, for guidance about the land. He became something his father once was: a protector, a teacher, a keeper of the ridge. And eventually, when a young rider with a gentle mare asked Marcus how he learned to read the land, he smiled, eyes soft with memory. "It wasn't me who learned," he said. "It was a horse who taught me." The girl tilted her head. "What was his name?" Marcus looked toward the ridge, the cottonwood tree, the soft rise where Flint rested. "Flint," he whispered. "And he saved more than my life. He saved who I was meant to be." The girl nodded, waiting for the rest of the story. Marcus took a slow breath, letting the wind brush past him, carrying the scent of sagebrush and rain. He spoke like a mentor, like a guardian, like a man shaped by destiny. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the land chooses its own heroes. And sometimes those heroes walk on 4 legs." The girl smiled. Marcus looked out at the valley again, calm, peaceful, alive. And for the first time in a long time, he felt Flint beside him. Not in body, in legacy. A presence carried by memory, by earth, by the quiet hum beneath the ridge that pulsed every so often like a heartbeat that never died. Marcus exhaled. "This land," he whispered, "isn't just ours to use. It's ours to protect." He stood tall, sun warming his face, the valley opening wide beneath him like a story waiting for its next chapter. Flint's story lived on in every sage-scented breeze, in every hoofprint left by the horses trained on the ranch, in every quiet vibration of the land that chose him. And Marcus, now a mentor, a guide, a guardian, smiled as the girl's mare nudged his arm. Because some bonds never end. They simply become lessons for the next generation. And so, in the quiet valley beneath the old foothills, a truth lived on, one that could never be measured in dollars or deeds, one that no amount of machinery or greed could ever pull from the earth. A broke rancher once followed his wandering horse into the dark, chasing nothing more than a question in the night, and the echo he heard changed his destiny. Marcus Reyes didn't find gold. He didn't find treasure. He didn't find a miracle waiting in the shadows of a forgotten mine. He found something far greater. He found legacy. He found purpose. He found a bond that reshaped the man he believed himself to be. And in time, Flint, the horse who carried that destiny on his back, grew old beneath the same sky that watched over them both. He closed his eyes in the very land he had protected, and left behind a story carved into the heartbeat of the ridge forever. Because this wasn't just a tale of a rancher and a horse. It was the story of a promise passed down through generations. A story of a land that remembers. A story of a guardian chosen not by chance, but by faith. And even though Flint's hooves no longer walked the earth, every sunrise that touched the hills carried a piece of him. Every tremor beneath the soil echoed the bond he forged. And every rider who learned from Marcus rode with a small part of Flint's courage beneath their saddle. In a world that so often rushes past the quiet miracles around us, Flint proved something simple and extraordinary. Sometimes the greatest truths are buried deep. Sometimes the strongest guides have 4 legs. And sometimes a single echo in the dark can lead you back to who you were meant to be. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this message of hope, and subscribe for more incredible horse stories and real-life miracles. Your support helps us keep telling these powerful tales of courage, loyalty, and the unbreakable bonds between humans and the horses who change their lives forever. Do you have a story of your own about a horse that touched your heart, saved your spirit, or changed your world? Tell us in the comments below. We read every single one, and your story might even inspire our next video. Until then, keep riding toward your purpose. Keep listening to the land, and remember, every horse has a story worth telling. And sometimes, every now and then, that story becomes a legend